I ran kennel ops out of Ramp 7 for 4 years before the compact ever set foot on Perrin's reach. And in all that time, I never once had to log an animal for insubordination. I'm telling you that up front, because it matters later. Bear never disobeyed an order in his life. He just kept one nobody gave him anymore. He was a Saint Bernard, big through the chest, gray coming in heavy around the muzzle, brown and white going patchy with age. Corporal Owen Vale raised him from a 10-week pup who couldn't climb the ramp stairs without falling on his own ears, and by the time Vale made corporal, Bear could carry a 40-kilo manifest satchel across the yard without breaking stride. They worked cargo intake together. Vale checked the crates. Bear carried the paperwork. It was, by any measure, the most boring job on the station. Ramp 7 isn't much to look at. Corrugated hull, plating the same gray-green as every dock in the reach system. A rail where shift supervisors stand to watch loadouts. A gate at the far end, opening onto the transfer road to the second relay. Cold most of the year, the kind of posting you get when someone decides you're steady rather than flashy. 6 months before the compact envoy arrived, Vale's transport rolled on the ice shelf during a supply run out past the second relay. Quick, they told me. Nobody's fault, they told me. I signed the paperwork, notified his mother back on the Reach's home continent, and reassigned his route to a corporal 2 years his junior, who didn't know the first thing about the dog she'd inherited along with the manifest. I figured Bear would take a few weeks to settle and go back to being a cargo dog like any other. Dogs mourn. Everyone knows that. They mope for a stretch, and the feeding schedule wins out over the grief, same as it does for most of us. He didn't settle. Every evening at 1840, the hour intake always ran. Bear got up from wherever he'd been lying, walked himself to Ramp 7, picked up the satchel from the rack. Nobody handed it to him, he just took it, and carried it to the gate. He sat there facing outward, not agitated, not whining. Just sitting, the way you sit when you're waiting on someone you're sure is coming. 10 minutes later, the exact stretch of time Vale used to spend walking the outbound crates, Bear stood up, set the satchel back on the rack himself, and lay down for the night. Nobody trained him to do that. I checked the logbooks twice to be sure, went back through the training records Vale had filed himself, and found nothing. No command word for it. No drill. It wasn't in Bear's training. It was something he'd decided on his own, the way you decide to keep showing up somewhere, long after the reason has stopped making sense to anyone watching. The rest of the kennel crew learned to work around it without being told. Nobody scheduled a loadout at Ramp 7 at 1840 anymore. It became, without a memo ever written, the one part of the day nobody touched. Attaché Ilith Koran came through on the third rotation after the compact opened trade talks with the Reach. Tall, narrow-shouldered, the kind of species that carries its authority in stillness rather than height. Pale gray skin under a formal logistics sash. Koran's job was efficiency review. Every asset on the roster, human or animal, got weighed against its output. Koran watched the 1840 handoff from the observation rail the first night, watched Bear sit at the gate with an empty satchel and no handler, and made a note on a data slate without asking me a single question. The note came back the next morning as a formal flag. Asset designation K9-07, quote, exhibits non-functional behavioral loop, unquote. Recommend reassignment to auxiliary kennel, non-active roster. Koran called me into the dockmaster's office to deliver it in person, which I took, at the time, as a courtesy. Compact officers don't usually bother with a face-to-face for a roster adjustment this small. Koran sat very still, hands folded, and read the flag aloud in a flat administrative register before sliding the slate across for my signature. There was no cruelty in it. That was almost the worst part. Koran genuinely believed the kindest thing to do with an animal performing a function with no purpose left in it was to relieve him of the function. I told Koran, flat, the way you tell someone a fact and not an opinion, that the dog's handler died 6 months back and that nobody had ordered him to keep walking that route. Koran's answer was, that grief, if that was what I wanted to call it, wasn't a category the compact recognized on an active logistics manifest. An animal that performed no function was dead weight on the roster, however it came to be that way. The reassignment would go through at the morning sign-off, unless I could show cause. I didn't have cause that would satisfy a data slate. I had a dog who still walked to a gate every evening. That's not a metric. I told Koran as much, and Koran didn't answer, just noted the time, and left the way attachés leave, without looking like they've decided anything, when they already have. I didn't sleep well that night. Neither, I think, did Bear, though he never once looked anything but calm about it. At 1840, he did what he always did, got up off the deck plating, walked himself to the rack, took the satchel in his jaw, carried it to the gate. I stood at the rail and watched, and didn't have the heart to stop him, order or no order. A few of the crew drifted over without being called, and stood with me, not saying much, the way people gather for something without quite admitting to each other why. What I didn't expect was Koran. The attaché came back alone, off the record, no aide, no slate that I could see, dressed down out of the formal sash. Stood at the far end of the rail, where the depot lights don't reach, and watched the whole 10 minutes without a word. Not the note-taking stillness of the day before, just watching the way you watch something you've decided, against your own instincts, to give a second look. Bear sat facing the gate the way he always did, ears up, unbothered, patient in a way that had nothing performed about it. He wasn't doing it for us. When the 10 minutes ran out, the exact stretch a young corporal used to spend walking outbound crates, Bear stood, carried the satchel back to the rack, set it down with his own jaw, careful as anything, and lay down for the night. Koran didn't move for a long moment after that. Then the attaché came down off the rail and asked me, quiet, almost like the question cost something, what the dog's handler's name had been. I told him, Owen Vale. Koran said the compact has a word. I won't try to render the sound of it, my mouth isn't built for it. That translates roughly to, the one who keeps the appointment. It's not a military term. It's older than that, tied to a custom on Koran's homeworld where a bonded pair, on the death of one, is expected by the whole community to see the other keep every shared duty alone, unassisted, for as long as the bond demands it, and the community's only obligation is to never interrupt it. Koran said, the compact hadn't seen it done by a species outside their own in 11 generations, certainly never by an animal, unprompted, with no one alive to ask it of him. The reassignment order never went through. Koran canceled it that night, standing right there at the rail, in about 4 words, and didn't offer to explain further, and I didn't ask. Some things you let stand as they are. Bear kept walking to the gate every evening after that. Nobody on the reach ever flagged him again. The compact crews that rotated through learned to leave Ramp 7 quiet at 1840, the same unspoken courtesy Koran had shown that first night. And more than once I caught one of them watching from a respectful distance with the particular stillness their kind uses for something they consider sacred. I don't know how long a dog keeps a promise like that. Longer than I expected, is the honest answer. Bear's still on the roster, still gray around the muzzle, a little slower up the ramp stairs than he used to be. He still gets up at 1840. He still carries the satchel nobody hands him. He still sits facing the gate for exactly as long as it used to take a young corporal to walk the outbound crates, and then he sets the bag down himself and goes to sleep. I close the gate on him most nights now. He doesn't need me to. He was never waiting on me. Some nights I think about the fact that nobody taught him to do any of it, that a dog can hold an appointment a man made and then couldn't keep, longer and steadier than most people manage to hold anything. I don't have a tidy way to put that in a report. I've stopped trying. He's out there right now, probably, sitting at the gate, facing outward, patient as the tide. Owen Vale isn't coming back through it. Bear doesn't know that the way we know it, or maybe he does, and it simply doesn't change what he's decided to do about it. Either way, he keeps the appointment, every evening, on time.